I used to think the worst thing a family could do is fight. Loud, ugly, undeniable. At least then you know where you stand. What my family did was quieter than that. And quiet damage, I've learned, leaves the deepest marks, because for the longest time, you're not even sure it's real. My name is Saoirse. Not the common spelling. Not the easy pronunciation. My mother chose it from a book of Celtic names when she was 22 and romantic about things like meaning. It means freedom. She told me that proudly when I was a child. I've thought about that a great deal since. I'm 34 now. I run a foundation that funds girls' education across 3 countries. I have a husband who still looks at me like I'm the most interesting person in any room. I have a life that is entirely, deliberately mine. But 8 years ago, I was 26, sitting in my parents' living room, watching my future get quietly handed to my younger sister and being expected to absorb it like I always had. His name was Callum. We had been together for nearly 2 years. He was methodical, quietly ambitious, the kind of man who meant every word he said and didn't say words he didn't mean. His family was traditional, reputation mattered to them, structure mattered, the long view of things mattered. I understood that world. I had grown up inside a version of it. What I didn't understand, not yet, was that my family had been running a separate calculation. One they never showed me. My sister Loan was 2 years younger and softer in all the ways my parents valued. Not weaker, I want to be precise about that, but more accommodating. Where I had learned to argue a point, she had learned to wait. Where I brought problems to the table, she smoothed surfaces. My parents read her patience as grace and my directness as friction. It was never said aloud. Families like mine don't say things aloud. They simply arrange them. The rearranging started small. Callum mentioned my father had invited him to dinner without telling me. I asked about it. My father said he was simply getting to know him better. I believed him. You believe your father when he says something is nothing. Then Aloan began appearing in conversations about Callum in ways that felt edited. He mentioned you seem overwhelmed lately. The new project, maybe? Or, he needs someone present, Saoirse. You're always building something. I was building something. That was true. I had been raised, I thought, to use my mind, to make things, to not sit still. Apparently, that quality had a shelf life in their estimation. The Sunday it ended, everyone was in the living room. My parents, Callum, Aloan, me. My father cleared his throat the way he did before board meetings, the sound of a man who had already decided and was now simply announcing. He said he and Callum's family had spoken. That after careful consideration, Callum and Aloan were the more suitable match. More balanced, he said. More sustainable. I looked at Callum. He was looking at the floor. I looked at Aloan. She was looking at her hands. I looked at my father. He was looking at me, not apologetically, not guiltily, but with the quiet assessment of a man monitoring a variable. I picked up my bag. I stood up. I left. Nobody followed. That silence, that complete, unbroken silence from everyone in that room, is what made the decision for me. They had prepared for my reaction. They had decided the trade was fair. And they expected me to accept it because I had always accepted things before. In the car, I made a decision. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a clean, internal commitment. I am done being the daughter who absorbs. What they didn't know, what I had told none of them, precisely because I had learned that sharing ambitions with my family meant watching them get minimized, was that I had been building something for almost a year. A foundation. Grant proposals already submitted. 2 early partnerships confirmed. A model I had spent evenings and weekends constructing quietly, without announcement, without permission. I kept it from them intentionally. And after that Sunday, I was deeply grateful I had. I cut contact in stages, then completely. The calls came my mother, an aunt, once Aloan, who said she hoped there were no hard feelings. I didn't respond cruelly. I just didn't respond in ways that left doors open. What I focused on instead was the work. I poured the hurt, the clarity, the anger I never performed for them. I turned all of it into structure, into systems, into something real. And Callum, I need to address this directly, because it matters. He ended the arrangement with Aloan within 3 weeks of that Sunday. I didn't know that then. I had blocked every channel connected to that chapter, his number, mutual contacts, all of it. I wasn't interested in updates. I was interested in forward motion. It was 7 months later, at a professional conference, that I saw him across a room. I didn't approach him. He approached me. And the first thing he said wasn't an excuse or an apology. It was, "I owe you a real conversation if you're willing." I wasn't willing that day. I told him so. But I didn't walk away permanently, because something in the way he said it, no performance, no self-justification, made me want to at least hear it. We met 3 weeks later. Over 4 hours, he told me everything. That he had been blindsided by how public and final the arrangement became in that room. That he froze not from agreement, but from a failure of courage he had spent months examining honestly. That he had tried to reach me through a colleague he knew we shared, who told him simply that I wasn't open to contact. He didn't ask me to forgive that freeze. He just named it for what it was. That honesty, the absence of excuse-making, was what eventually rebuilt my trust. Not quickly. Not easily. Over a year of careful, often uncomfortable conversation before anything romantic was restored. We built the second version of us on foundations the first version never had. We married privately. 2 witnesses. A small dinner. No announcement. My family knew none of it. The foundation's first major gala was 18 months ago. Black tie. 200 donors, civic leaders, press. Callum had been involved in building it with me for years by then, operationally, strategically, publicly listed on our website as Director of Partnerships. My family was not on the guest list. A well-meaning distant cousin, unaware of the full history, added them through a side channel. I was informed 1 hour before doors opened. I considered having them turned away. I had every right to. Instead, I made a different choice. I let them in because by then I understood that the most complete thing I could give them wasn't exclusion. It was visibility. Let them see it. All of it. Let them stand inside what I had built and understand exactly what their calculation had failed to account for. They walked in not knowing Callum's role. Not knowing his name was on the foundation's materials. Not knowing that the man they had quietly redirected 8 years ago was about to step onto a stage in a room I had built. They took their seats. The lights settled. And Callum walked to the podium. I watched my father from across the room. Watched the moment his eyes registered the face. Watched his hand find the back of his chair. He didn't fall. But the certainty he had carried into every room for as long as I could remember, that quiet, absolute confidence in his own calculations. I watched it leave his face entirely. They were still processing what they were seeing. And the evening had only just begun. Callum didn't rush the moment. That was the thing about him. He never performed for rooms. He adjusted the microphone, looked out at 200 people with the ease of someone who had earned his place there, and began speaking about the foundation's work with the fluency of someone who had lived alongside its growth for years. Because he had. He spoke for 12 minutes. He was precise, warm, compelling. The room was fully with him. Applause came in the middle, not just at the end. When he stepped off the stage, he walked directly to me. No hesitation. He took my hand, kissed my cheek, said quietly, "You good?" I said yes. I meant it. 40 feet away, my father was still holding the back of his chair. My mother came to me first. 20 minutes later, during a transition between speakers, she materialized at my side with the careful movement of someone navigating unfamiliar terrain. She said my name. She said the event was beautiful. She said I looked well. I thanked her for each. Then she said, voice lowered, "We didn't know. About Callum. About any of this. I want you to know that." I looked at her steadily. "I know you didn't." She waited for more. There wasn't more. She tried a different angle. "We only ever wanted what was right for you. For everyone." And here is what I've learned about that sentence. We only wanted what was right, after years of turning it over. It is almost always true, and almost always insufficient. People cause serious damage while wanting the right thing. The wanting doesn't undo the damage. It just makes the person who caused it more comfortable. I didn't say that to her. I said, "I believe that's what you thought." Someone called my name across the room. I excused myself. That was the entirety of what she received. My father found me near the bar an hour later. He was more direct. That was always his register. He said Callum seemed well, that the foundation was clearly doing important work. There was something reaching in his tone, an attempt to locate himself inside the evening, to find a ledge he could stand on in a structure he had played no part in building. I didn't offer him one. He moved toward the past then, the way people do when the present doesn't give them enough room. He said families make decisions with imperfect information, that these things were complicated, that he hoped I understood he had believed he was acting in everyone's interest. I let him finish. Then I said, I made peace with it a long time ago, Dad. He searched my face for something, anger, residual hurt, a crack he could widen into reconciliation. He found composure, which was not what he was hoping for, but it was the only thing I had on offer. He nodded slowly. He walked away. I noticed his posture had changed. Still straight, he was too practiced for collapse, but something in it had shifted. The posture of a man quietly recalibrating. Eloan found me close to the end of the evening. She looked tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep, the tiredness of someone carrying something that was never quite theirs to carry, for longer than they intended. I had thought about her more than either of my parents over the years, because her position had always been the most complicated. She hadn't engineered anything. She had simply not refused loudly enough at a moment when a loud refusal would have mattered. That's not nothing. But it's also not the same as malice. She said, I'm sorry, Saoirse. I should have said something that day. I knew it wasn't right. I believed her. I had believed it for years, actually, which was part of why I had reserved a different kind of quiet for her than the one I gave our parents. Not warmth exactly, but the absence of hardness. I said, I hope you're well, Eloan. She nodded. Her eyes were bright in a way that meant she was holding something back. I didn't invite it forward. Not because I was being cruel, but because that evening was not the place, and I was not the person she needed to process it with. Some conversations require more than a single exchange at a gala, to be honest. And I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet. Perhaps someday. Not that night. They left before 11. I watched them move toward the exit, my father first, my mother beside him, Eloan slightly behind. No ceremony. No final exchange. I felt something watching them go. Not triumph. Triumph would have required me to still be fighting, and I had stopped fighting years ago. Not grief either, though there had been plenty of that, earlier, in private, where it belonged. What I felt was something closer to completion. The satisfaction of a long equation finally, fully balanced. Here is what I know now. The foundation my family believed I was always too distracted to build has, in 6 years, funded education for over 11,000 girls across 3 countries. The man they quietly redirected toward my sister chose, entirely of his own volition, to spend his career building it alongside me. The life they never imagined for me turned out to be larger, more deliberate, and more meaningful than anything their calculation had accounted for. They were not bad people. I want to be honest about that. They were people who made a serious error in a quiet room on a Sunday afternoon, who chose the version of me that fit their framework over the version that was actually standing in front of them. That is a failure of imagination as much as love. But their failure of imagination was the condition under which I built everything. I needed them to underestimate me. I needed the door to close. I needed the silence in the car afterward, that cold, clarifying silence, to show me exactly what I was willing to build from. Some foundations require a fracture first. Callum and I drove home that night with the windows slightly down, the city quiet. He didn't ask for a full debrief. He just said, at one point, you handled that with a lot of grace. I told him I'd had time to prepare. He laughed softly, took my hand, and that was enough. That was, in fact, everything. The people who underestimate you are not your enemies. They are, if you let them be, your proof. What would you have done, stayed and fought, or left and built? Tell me in the comments.